Hi, welcome back to Making Business Personal. I'm Jason Weiss. Over the weekend, my family and I went down to San Diego to watch a golf tournament, and we were all sharing the same hotel room, which was great. But I saw something happen that was, at face value, scary. My 16-month-old son hit my wife. Now, before you call protective services or anything, let me explain what happened because it might have an effect on your own leadership. You see, I was playing with Grace in the room and, we were messing around. I was poking her, tickling. She was getting me back. We're really overtired as parents of two young children. So we joke around a lot. And Max, my son, he saw what we were doing and he wanted to join in. So he walks over and he starts hitting Grace. But I don't mean playing, I mean hitting. But the thing is, he wasn't trying to hurt her. He learned that behavior by watching me because he doesn't know the difference between being playful and being harmful. He doesn't understand context or boundaries. He doesn't understand appropriate behavior. He just knows that daddy does this, so I should do it to mommy too. And that's the thing. People learn by watching, and your people are doing the exact same thing. You see, your people, they don't know which of your behaviors got you promoted and which ones are just your bad habits. All they know is that you're the leader, so a lot of what you do must be leadership. Because you're a leader, your smallest habits become someone else's strategy. Your worst behaviors become their normal, and your unconscious patterns become their conscious choices. And most of the time, you have no idea it's happening. So today, I'm going to show you something I do with almost all of my clients. And it's something that might change the way you think about leadership forever because mimicry isn't growth. And your team is copying you right now, whether you know it or not. So let's dive in. Now, Max, he's at that age where he's like a tiny mirror following me around the house. I mean, everything I do, he tries to copy. At first, it's adorable. I mean, he pretends to shave, he tries to put on my shoes, he helps me make coffee, and he dumps things all over the place. And people love to point out how much he's like me. Mostly the funny stuff, the cute quirks, the way he tilts his head, the way he's thinking. But this past weekend, I noticed that when he hit my wife, that I'm doing some things that I may not want to keep doing. When I get frustrated, sometimes I raise my voice. And when I do that, Max raises his voice. When I sigh in annoyance, he makes this little frustrated sound. And when I'm impatient and I start moving fast, he gets agitated too. And the worst part? He has no idea which behaviors are good and which behaviors are harmful. Because to him, everything I do must be right because I'm his dad. So when I playfully roughhouse with Grace, and she could take care of herself, he thinks that's how you show affection. When I get snappy around the house because maybe I'm stressed about something, he thinks that's how you communicate when things don't go your way. And, I'm not just raising a child here. I'm programming a human being, and I don't want to accidentally program him with my worst habits. And this isn't just happening at home. This is happening everywhere and anywhere that you lead. So any eye roll, any impatient sigh, any time that you check your phone when someone's talking or you make a passive aggressive comment, someone's watching, someone's learning, someone's copying, and they're copying the stuff that you don't even realize you're doing. The unconscious patterns, the bad habits, the behaviors that you would never want to teach, but you're teaching them anyway through your own repetition. So think of your team as a room full of 16-year-olds or 16-month-olds. They don't know which behaviors got you promoted and which ones are just your neuroses. All they know is that you're a successful leader. So what you're doing must be what leadership is. And that should be somewhat terrifying for you. I worked with a VP at a med tech company, and she was really brilliant. I mean, most of the people I work with are brilliant. She's got an MBA from Harvard. I mean, not that Harvard means better, but come on. I mean, it's Harvard. She had an incredibly strategic mind, but she had this really strange habit. And I mean a habit. It was completely unconscious. It was automatic behavior. What she would do is she would exhale loudly and then glance at her phone whenever she felt like a meeting was dragging, kind of like, like that, right? But she never told anyone to rush. She never said that the meetings were too long, but her signals were screaming, "We're behind. We're wasting time. And this is just inefficient." And so within 2 months, I watched her direct reports start cutting each other off in every meeting. People stopped asking clarifying questions, and projects started getting shipped with the whole, like, well, we'll figure it out later thing, rather than let's make sure this is right. Now, nobody announced that there was a culture change. There was no memo saying, hey, move faster, think less. But the entire division started operating like they were perpetually behind schedule because their leader's body language was broadcasting urgency and impatience. Now, 3 months later, they had their first major problem. And it cost the company quite a lot of money. And it cost her reputation. And it took a long time to repair that. Now, she had no idea that her unconscious habit had cascaded into a culture of cutting corners. But here's what's even crazier. I see this everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. I mean, think about a CEO who checks emails during presentations. So now his executives start multitasking in every meeting. And then pretty soon, no one's present for anything. Or the sales manager who interrupts people when they're explaining problems. So now her team stops bringing up problems. They just hide them. And then they become disasters. Then there's the director who uses sarcasm when he's frustrated. So now his department develops this toxic undercurrent of passive aggressive communication. Now, none of these leaders meant to teach these behaviors, but they repeated them. So their people copied them. And here's the science behind why this happens. We're wired for observational learning. Mirror neurons in our heads fire when we watch someone else perform an action, literally preparing our brain to copy what we see. But here's the kicker. And this is what it's going to blow your mind. We copy negative behaviors faster than we copy positive behaviors. Research shows that one negative interaction has the same psychological impact as 5 positive ones. Your bad habits are literally 5 times more contagious than your good ones. So when you sigh in frustration just one time, it takes 5 instances of positive engagement to balance that out. When you check your phone dismissively one time, your team remembers that more than the 5 times you gave great feedback. Your worst moments are the most teachable moments, and you're teaching lessons that you never meant to give. And this is why culture checks don't work. This is why value statements on the walls are pretty much meaningless, because it's your daily micro signals that are drowning out your corporate messaging. You think you're leading with your words, but you're actually leading with your unconscious behaviors. And those behaviors are creating a culture that you never intended. I was working with this executive team, and the senior leader asked me to observe their weekly leadership meetings. We were doing a leadership development project together. And so I needed to see what are their best behaviors and what needed improving. So I just sat there. I sat in the corner. I took notes and I looked at their team dynamics. I looked at the way they worked together. So there I am. I'm watching. And within the first 10 minutes of the first meeting, I noticed something kind of weird. Every time someone presented an idea that the senior leader wasn't immediately excited about, he'd do this little thing. He'd lean back slightly. He'd cross his arms. I mean, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious, but it was this subtle body language shift that said, I'm skeptical. And then I watched his entire leadership team start unconsciously mirroring that same behavior. So someone would propose something, and if it wasn't immediately perfect, you'd see this wave of crossed arms and backwards leans all around the table. So by the end of the meeting, ideas were getting shot down before they were fully explained, and people were self-editing before they spoke. The innovation was just dying in real time with each cross of the arms. And the senior leader, he was completely oblivious. In his mind, he was being appropriately cautious, but his body language was teaching his team to be reflexively negative. So I showed him a recording of one of the meetings, but I turned the audio off. And in just 60 seconds of silent footage, he watched himself lean back and cross his arms, and then he watched the entire team do the same thing. They were like a bunch of dominoes just going boom, 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 boom. And he said something along the lines of, I can't believe what I'm doing here. I'm creating a culture of no, and I never even said no. You see, we're all unconsciously broadcasting our internal state, our stress, our impatience, our skepticism, even our boredom. And it's all showing up in micro expressions and body language that our people are reading and then they're copying. But here's what's really messed up. Your team copies your stress patterns. They copy your communication quirks. They copy your decision-making shortcuts and your emotional reactions. You know, the stuff you wish they wouldn't learn from you. I started paying attention to my own patterns a little while ago, and I noticed that when I'm tired, I get short with people. And when I'm stressed, and I don't get stressed that often, but I get stressed, I interrupt people a little more. And when I'm frustrated, my tone gets a little bit edgy. Maybe a little more than a little. But I realized that every person who I've ever mentored or coached or led, well, they've most likely learned those patterns from me. So my impatience would become their normal pace. My shortcuts became their standard process. And then my bad days, those became their behavioral blueprint. A lot of people think that leadership is about the big moments. It's the speeches, it's the decisions, the strategy sessions. But real leadership is happening in the micro moments. It's the way you respond when someone interrupts you, your facial expression when you hear bad news, how long you wait before you respond to someone's question. And your team, they're not really learning a lot from your PowerPoint presentations. They're learning from your patterns. And those patterns are either creating the culture you want or they're destroying it. And let me explain why this happens. Because once you understand the psychology, you can't unsee it. There's this thing called the chameleon effect, where we unconsciously mirror the people who are around us, especially people with status who are in authority. And it's not a choice. It's hardwired into our brains. So when you're the leader, you're essentially broadcasting on the loudest frequency in the room. Everything you do gets amplified because you have the positional power. But here's the twisted part. Negative behaviors spread faster than positive ones because they're more memorable. Threat detection is our brain's priority system. We notice and remember what could hurt us. So when you lose your temper once, your team remembers that more vividly than the 50 times where you were patient. When you dismiss someone's idea sarcastically because you think it might be funny, Well, that sticks more than all of your encouraging feedback. And here's the thing that makes this so difficult. Your bad habits are easier to copy than your good ones. Think about it. Interrupting someone, that's immediate. It's observable. But being a great listener, that requires internal discipline, and that's harder to see. That's harder to copy. Checking your phone, that's visible. It's simple. But being fully present, that's complex. That's internal. Getting impatient, that's obvious and it's instant. But having strategic patience, sometimes that just looks like you're doing nothing. Your vices are more contagious than your virtues because they're more visible and because they require less skill to replicate. And this creates a downward spiral. Your team starts copying your worst behaviors, which makes your job harder, which makes you more stressed, and that creates more bad behaviors to copy. I watched this happen with a financial client a little while ago. Their regional director had this habit of sighing heavily when people brought in problems. Not yelling, not being mean, just sighing. When someone had a problem, they go, a lot like my 3-year-old, basically. And within 6 months, his entire region was avoiding bringing him issues until they became a crisis because subconsciously they learned that problems were burdens. They weren't opportunities to help. So his sigh created a culture of hiding problems. His minor, tiny little display of frustration turned into a major business risk because people stopped communicating early warning signs. One sigh, repeated many, many, many times unconsciously, was copied systematically, had a business impact that was devastating. And the craziest part is that he thought he was being patient. He was being patient by not saying anything. He had no idea that his nonverbal communication was louder than any of the words that he could have used. And all of this is happening in your organization, in your family life, in your friend circle right now. Your unconscious patterns are being studied, copied, and scaled by people who think they're learning how to be successful like you. So the question becomes, what are you accidentally teaching? So how do you fix it? How do you turn these unconscious patterns into intentional culture building? Well, I'm going to give you 3 moves that might change the way your teams copy your behavior. And these aren't feel-good exercises. They're not tips and tricks. These are measurable surgical precision tools. So the first one is the 72-hour behavioral check. So for the next 3 days, starting tomorrow, I want you to ask someone you trust to log your visible micro behaviors in your meetings. Not what you say, but what you do. Any interruptions, device checks, tone shifts, how long you wait after somebody asks a question, even your facial expression when you disagree with someone, but not for judgment. There's no judgments here. There's no commentary. You're just looking for data. Pure behavioral counts. Now, at the end of those 3 days, circle one of the habits that you want to amplify, and then circle a habit that you want to eliminate. But here's the key. You've got to tie them to specific moments. Here's what I mean. Don't just simply say, I want to be more patient. You got to be intentional. Say, in Monday morning stand-up, I'll wait 3 beats before I respond to anyone. And don't say, something generic like, I want to be more encouraging. Say something specific. When someone presents an idea, I will visibly write down one thing I like before I give the feedback. Concrete moments equal measurable behaviors. Now, the second thing is the silent clip test, just like I did with my guy. Record your next team meeting, camera on, but here's the twist. When you review it, turn the audio off. Just watch 60 seconds of yourself with no sound, just your body language, your facial expressions, basically your energy. And then ask yourself, Ask yourself this question. If a new hire watched this clip, would they learn the right culture by watching this, or would they learn the wrong one? Now, if the answer is the wrong one, and chances are it will be, rewrite one visible behavior and practice it in your very next meeting. Maybe you can write down the question you want to ask before you speak instead of asking. Maybe you visibly take notes when someone shares a good idea instead of just nodding. And then maybe you turn your camera on and you keep it on instead of staying hidden. So you choose one behavior for your next behavior, one behavior for your next meeting, and then you put it into immediate practice. Now, the third one is model the meta. And this one can be a game changer. When you do the thing that you want copied, narrate it in real time. You could say, like, I'm pausing before I respond so that I don't jump to a conclusion. I'm asking a clarifying question instead of assuming that I know what you mean. Or I'm turning my camera on because this deserves face-to-face attention. You see, you're teaching the behavior and the thinking behind the behavior. So this is social learning by design instead of by accident. And when your team hears you say, that pause we just took saved us from a week of confusion, now they learn that pausing has value. And when you say, this question we're asking right now is going to prevent 3 follow-up meetings, well, then they're going to learn that clarification is efficiency. So you're not just modeling what to do, you're modeling how to think about what you're doing. Now, these 3 moves can transform your unconscious habits into conscious culture building. So your team will start copying your intentional behaviors instead of your accidental ones. Because the most powerful leaders don't just do the right things. They teach others how to think about doing the right things. All right. So here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to pick one micro behavior that you want your team to copy, just one. Maybe it's pausing before you react to bad news. Maybe it's asking, hey, what do you think, before you give your opinion? Or maybe it's putting your phone face down during conversations. Or crazier yet, not even having your phone visible. And what I want you to do is write that behavior on a sticky note where only you can see it so you remember, and then practice it intentionally in every interaction. But here's the vulnerable part. You need to tell your team exactly what you're working on. You could say something like, I'm trying to be better at listening fully before I respond. So if you notice me rushing to judgment, go ahead and call me out on it. Because when you're transparent about your growth, you give your team permission to grow too. You model that leadership isn't about being perfect, it's about being intentional. So just imagine a workplace where people copy your curiosity instead of your impatience, where they mirror your thoughtfulness instead of your stress, where they replicate your encouragement instead of your criticism. Just imagine your team bringing you problems early because they learned that problems are opportunities to collaborate and not reasons to panic. And now, imagine meetings where people build on each other's ideas because they've watched you do it consistently. And imagine a culture where people feel safe to be vulnerable because they've seen you model that vulnerability is strength. And this isn't a fantasy. I've seen this happen. It's what happens when you get intentional about what you're modeling. Because whether you realize it or not, you're already teaching. The question is, what are you teaching? Because your people, your family, your friends, they're watching you right now. They're learning from your patterns. They're copying your behaviors. So what do you want them to learn? When I realized that Max was copying my worst habits, I had a simple choice. I can make excuses about how hard parenting is, how stressful work can be, how nobody's perfect, or I could accept that this tiny human was learning how to be a person by watching me be a person. And if I wanted him to be the best version of himself, I had to be the best version of myself. Now, the same is true for your team. They're learning how to be professionals by watching you be a professional. They're learning how to be a VP by watching you be a VP. They're learning how to be in the C suite by watching you be in the C suite. They're learning how to handle pressure by watching the way you handle pressure. And they're learning the way to treat people by watching the way you treat people. Every day, in every interaction, you're programming the next generation of people, not just leaders, but people. So you're either teaching them that being a person means being perfect, or you're teaching them that being a person means being intentional about growth. The leaders who change the world aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who are conscious about what they're modeling. They're intentional about what they're teaching, and they're brave enough to grow in front of their people. Because your team doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to be aware. They need you to care about the impact that you're having. And they need you to be intentional about the culture that you're creating through your daily behaviors. Because at the end of the day, leadership, just as life, isn't about what you've accomplished. It's about what you leave behind in the people who follow you. That's legacy. Yesterday, I watched my eldest, Everly, playing with her toys. And instead of throwing them when she got frustrated, like she almost always did before, she took a deep breath and she tried again. Now, she learned this from watching me practice that same behavior when I got stuck on something. And I did it in front of her intentionally so that she could see Dad work his way through things. We're not just raising children. We're not just leading teams. We're creating the next version of humanity, one behavior at a time. So what version are you creating? Now, this is what I do with most of the teams I work with most of the people I coach. And if this is something that you would like to be more intentional about, and if you'd like help modeling the behavior that you want to see in others, reach out to me anytime. You could always find me on my website, jasonweissconsulting.com. I would be happy to schedule a call with you. And as always, share this episode with someone who you think might need to hear it. And you could tag me with your biggest insights because I'd love to hear your feedback, and use the hashtag Making Business Personal. So please go ahead and like this, follow, subscribe, leave a comment, all the things, the algorithmic things that help spread the word, because that's why we're doing this, to spread the word. And remember, your people don't copy your mission statement. They copy your Monday morning facial expression. So you better make it count. All right. That's it for this week. I'll see you next time on Making Business Personal. Make it a great day. Bye-bye.